Hi, I'm Rohit, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you how to create a simple REST API with TypeScript and Express.js. Before we actually create our API, we have to understand what is an API and what is a REST API. So by definition, APIs are mechanisms that enable two software components to communicate with each other using a set of definitions and protocols. So what is a REST API? You can see in this diagram there's a client and a server, and the client is usually the end user or a website, and the server is what we are going to be making. So the client sends requests using HTTP methods, which are hypertext transfer protocol methods such as get, post, delete, and put, to different URLs and servers such as /surveys, /surveys123, and so on. And depending on the URL and the method used for the request, the server can process this request and return a response to the client via JSON. So overall, what an API does is it processes different types of requests and it returns a response. Now that we know what an API basically is, let's actually create one. So I'm going to go onto my terminal and create a new directory called REST API tutorial. And now that I have that, I'm going to go inside of it with cd, and we actually have to check if we have npm and node.js installed. So we could just do npm-v and node-v. So you can see I have npm version 9.5.1 and node.js version 18.16.1. So your version doesn't have to be exactly mine, but just make sure it's up to date. Now that we have this, let's do npm init-y, and what this is going to do is create a package.json inside of my project. So you can see a package.json was created inside of my project. And now finally, I'm going to install Express. So we can do npm install Express. And it's installing the dependencies. And now that it's done, we are ready to start our project. So I'm going to hop onto my code editor. You can use anything that you want, such as VS Code, Sublime Text, any IDE or text editor that you're comfortable with. I'll be using AstroVim. So you can see that we have three things: node modules, package lock, and package.json. So I'm going to create a new directory called source, so src and then a slash. And inside of source, sorry, I think I made it in node modules by accident. Yeah, let me just remove it from here. Okay, so I just deleted it from node modules. You have to make it in your root. So src and then a slash. And now that we've made it, you have to make index.js inside of it. And we can now open up our index.js file, and inside of here we're going to actually import Express by doing const express equals and then require Express, and we can ignore the alert that it will show for now. And now we actually have to initialize an app, so we can do const app equals Express. Okay, so we've initialized an app. Now we actually have to run the app. So to run it, we use app, then we do .listen. And listen will take two parameters. One is the port of our app, and our app will be running on localhost, so it'll take the localhost port that we want to use. So for example, I can just put like 8080 over here, and then we give it an arrow function. So I'm actually going to define our port inside of a variable called port, like this, and then I can just say port inside of here. And inside of the arrow function that we've opened inside of the .listen, I'm going to do console.log and then server running at http localhost : and then port. And now we can save this, And we can try running it, but by running npm run start, this is going to give us an error. It's going to say missing script start. So yeah, you can see over here it says missing script start. So what we have to do is actually create a script called start inside of our package.json. So inside of scripts, I'm going to make a new script called start, and I'm going to say node and then space period. And this is also going to give an error. As you can see, if I run npm run start, it's going to say a module not found REST API tutorial / index.js. So if I go up, you'll see cannot find module REST API tutorial index.js. So I'm just gonna go down and clear, and we actually have to change the main inside of package.json to fix this issue. So instead of index.js, we do src/index.js. And that's because our index.js is located inside of our source directory. So we have to set the main to target index.js. So if you have index.js in a different directory or in the root, you can change src to the directory, or you can remove it to make it run in the root. Now that we have that, we can do npm run start, and this is going to start up a new Express server. So it's a server running at localhost 8080. And now what we can do is come over here and copy this URL. So I've copied it, and I'm going to use a tool called Postman. So Postman is a great tool to send requests to any APIs or servers that you're creating. So you have the option to make a GET request, POST request, so on. And instead of the URL, you can just paste in your application or server URL and click send. So we're going to get a 404 not found error, and that's because we don't actually have any endpoints. So let me explain what that is. So you can see, let me just quit this. Inside of index.js, we just have an initialized app, and we are listening to this app at this port. But there's actually no roots such as for example /survey or /survey123 for the server to actually know what we're expecting as a result from that request. So let's just make a new endpoint using app, and then we have to say the method that the endpoint looks for. So for example, we're going to use a get, and this will take two required parameters. One is the actual root that this endpoint will be looking for. So for now, I'll just put a slash, and I'll explain what that means in a second. And then comma, and then an arrow function. And now inside of this slash represents just like the regular URL. So if I go to localhost :8080, it's just going to return whatever is in this arrow function, because that's what the slash is. But if I put something like test root after the slash, then if I just go to localhost :8080, it's going to give me a 404 not found. But if I go to the test root, then I can see that I'll get the response because there's a listener for /test root. And I'm going to remove this for now. You can see it better in action when we actually restart the server with the new endpoint, but we have our slash, and inside of the parentheses for the arrow function, I'm going to do req for request and res for our response. And finally, we're going to do response.send, and we're just going to send a message like hello world. And we can save this, reopen our terminal. So you have to stop the current server and then rerun npm run start. Okay, so server's running at localhost :8080. So back in Postman, I'm going to send another request. And as you can see, we get hello world as a message. But if I go to /test root, it's going to give us 404 not found. So you can probably see how that works now. Since we have an endpoint for slash, then we're getting the response said in slash. But if we go to something that doesn't exist, like test root, we're getting our 404 not found. So now let's actually create something for test root. So app.get, and I'm going to do /test root, then req res, and open up our error function, and then we're going to do response.send test root hello, and then restart the server. And now that the server has restarted, inside of just our slash, we're getting hello world, but inside of test root, we are now getting test root hello. So as you can see, depending on the URL that we send, the server can return different responses and perform different actions based off of the URL. Great, so now that we know how that works, you may have noticed that we're doing code inside of index.js, which is a JavaScript file, so we have not been using TypeScript so far. So at the beginning of the video, I said that we are going to be making this with TypeScript and Express. So let's get started installing and using TypeScript. So first we can stop this server and quit. And back in our terminal, we are going to be running some commands in order to install TypeScript. So I have everything in a text file over here. So it's going to be npm I, and the I is just for install, so it would be the same thing as like doing this. So npm install, then the dash capital D is for a dev dependency, and TypeScript @types/express and @types/node. So when we click enter, this is going to install those dependencies. And now that that's done, we are going to run npx tsc, which is the TypeScript compiler, then --init. Okay, and it says created a new TSConfig.json file, and we can clear this, clear, and then head on to our code editor. And now you can see that I have a tsconfig.json, and this is like a pretty huge file, 109 lines, but we won't be needing this because I have created a tsconfig.json file that we can use. So all of this will be in the description of the video for you to be able to copy and paste. But yeah, I'm going to copy all of this, delete it, come back to our text file, and then paste this in and save. Now we have to edit our package.json, and inside of scripts, I'm going to make a new script called pre-start, which will run before start. That's going to be npm run build, and before pre-start, I'm going to make something called build, and this is just going to say TSC. Now let's save this and open up our terminal and run. Actually, before that, we have to rename our file. So instead of src, we're going to rename index.js to index.ts. And that means inside of main, we are going to rename src to dist. And why we are doing that is because, save this. Then why we are doing that is because we see in our tsconfig.json, our out there is dist, meaning the output of the compiled TypeScript is going to go to a directory called dist. So now we can go back to our terminal and then run npm run start, and we can see that our code is going to be compiled and run. So first it's running npm run build, and then it's running tsc, and finally it's going to run node space period. Yeah, we have some errors, but yeah, our compiling was successful, so TSC works. Let's take a look at what our error is. So I'm going to just open up index.ts, and our error is, let's just wait for the editor to tell us what our errors is. And we can see that parameter req implicitly has an any type, and we get that for line 6 as well as 10. And in line 1 we say require call may be converted to an import. So the first thing that I'm going to do is comment out the first line, and I'm going to do import express from, and then express. And after that we can do import express, comma, and then request and response. And inside of each error function's parameter, we're going to do req and then give it a type of request, and for res give it a type of response, as you can see over here. And then similarly, req is request, and then res is response. Okay, now we can save this file, go back to our terminal, then do npm run start once again. So first it's going to trigger the npm run build, and afterwards it's going to do tsc, and then finally node. Okay, so great, it says server running at localhost 8080, and if we go back to Postman and send a request, we see that our server is successfully running. Okay, great, now that this is working, we're actually going to build a little mock API. So our API is going to be a random generator. For example, we're going to be creating an endpoint to generate random quotes, and we are also going to be generating an making an endpoint that generates random numbers. Okay, and now that we know what we're going to be making, let's stop our server and get started with making it. So I'm going to close out my terminal and get rid of my test root, and I'm going to make a new endpoint, which is a get, and I'm going to do /random/quote, and then req request, and then res response. And I'm just gonna save this now, and we're gonna hop on to our file tree and make a new file called quotes.json. And now that we've created that, I'm just gonna close some of these, and inside of my notepad I have some JSON for our quotes file, so I'm just gonna copy all of this and then paste it in and save. So again, this will also be available from the description of the video, so you can copy this in and paste it. So it's like 176 lines, and we can close this, and now I'll just delete the first line, and I'm just gonna say const quotes equals require, and it's going to require our quotes.json, and save this. And for now I'm just gonna put in res.send, and I'm gonna send quotes.quotes, and just maybe the first one. And we can run our server with npm run start. So it may take some time to run the server. Okay, great, now the server is running, and if I go to Postman, it's gonna say 404 not found for test root, and that's because we removed the endpoint for test root. I'm gonna do /random/quote, and as you can see, we get our first quote that's present in quotes.json, which is "Life is a Journey" by Oliver Goldsmith. That's what we are given. Okay, great. Now let's stop our server. And inside of index.ts, we actually want to randomly generate a quote. So inside of the brackets, I'm going to do math.floor math.random, and then times, and then quotes dot length minus 0, and then plus 1. Then at the end we just have to do minus min, but since our minimum is 0 either way, it does not make a difference. So this may be a little cluttered, so let me just kind of open it up so it's easy to see. And I'm going to save this, and we can restart our server. And it is building and starting, and great. Now when I click run, it's going to give me a different quote every time that we press send. As you can see, it's taking random quotes and it's sending them. So great, we've created our first ever endpoint for giving random quotes. So now let's learn how to create an endpoint that gives us random numbers.